Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Psychonaut Sessions. You were just listening to the music of the one and only Grand Wizard himself, Sam Tsohonis. Is it pronounced?
Yeah.
Tsohonis? Okay, so it's perfect.
It's a silent T. That's the only trick. That's my MC name.
There we go. That's awesome. So yeah, man, thanks for joining me for a session to just sit around and chat and draw and get to know each other some more.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I almost wish I would have pushed record about 15 minutes ago because we got on and just started chatting right away. So
you got into some stuff, that's for sure. I've been really digging on the shamanic soul. The last couple of days I've been off because I've been working just on drawing, kind of like a madman. But yeah, it's cool. It's been an interesting introduction to a deeper into your world, and then also, yeah, I kind of like investigated stuff about shamanism back like in my teens and 20s, and I've still kind of experimented with some of the shamanic substances since then. But I haven't really invested as much into like the spiritual aspect, which I really was kind of like reaching in that direction for a period. And some of the stuff you talk about has kind of brought back to mind some kind of like groundbreaking moments I've had over the years. It's, just kind of a couple of crazy experiences that I really hadn't thought about. It's been kind of cool. It's got a simpatico vibe going on.
You're embarrassing me, man. Like, yeah, I appreciate that. No, thank you. The journey of that book for me has been like a really long and hard one. And so it's nice to finally get it out, but I also have this relationship with it where I'm just like, okay, I'm done. That going through the process with a big house publisher is it can be exhausting, especially just like when you're in all these interviews and you have to talk about, and then that it's really weird to navigate because when you write something that is about quote unquote spirituality, people expect something different. So like when you get into interviews and stuff, they interact with you like you're supposed to be some sort of spiritual teacher or some shit like that, and it's so, what are we doing here? I'm just a dude who had some experiences and wrote something, did research because I really enjoy it, and I'm just communicating information is all I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the metaphysical industry, for lack of a better term, is just, it's kind of fucked up to me, and I don't really enjoy. I think you probably are in the same spot, but raised in fundamentalist Christianity, it's not that I had a rejection of like some of the value sets and things of the way in which I was raised, because I'm appreciative of my parents, but the organizational institutional aspect of whenever you create those types of institutions around a spiritual doctrine, it just becomes so dangerous. It just becomes insane, really, like to the actual definition of like what insanity is. And I moved into alternative spiritual paths to explore, other ways to just be myself and to have my own relationship with the universe. But there's an industry that's created around all of these like alternative modes now, and it's so. Oh, sorry, my phone started.
Right, and I was thinking when you were describing doing the interviews and stuff, and the expectations of your audience and stuff, I would imagine there's some pressure from the management of the publisher too to try and like perpetuate that image too, because they probably sell a lot better if you present yourself as a figurehead, because then they can create a movement around you.
Oh yeah.
I don't know what they're really looking for. Like, I could be wrong, but
yeah. You have to create this like identity, and have this kind of profile. And if you don't match that profile, and it's no knock to the publicists I've worked with, because they're great people, they're very nice. But I understand as a business, as an industry, if you're not going to match that profile that normally equates to bank for them, they're not going to be able to give you much attention.
Right.
So that leaves it all back onto you, even though you're going through like a major publisher, and it's like I might as well just be, I'm in the back in the same boat as like self-publishing comics and stuff.
That'd be frustrating. I still say that's quite an accomplishment. I grew up in a house that was pretty new age. Like, at least half of it was. My mom had like a whole collection of tarot and
Nice.
Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung and palmistry and astrology books and stuff. She was tinkering on the side with it. But my dad like kind of like made her hide it because he was like kind of like, I think kind of maybe not afraid of God, but he just didn't want to go there. Like, it wasn't even about Orthodox Christianity or some religion. It was just he didn't want to go there, and so he didn't like it. He brought his friends over, but they had separation when I was about 12, and that was what changed afterwards. Is mom's books were out in the open afterwards. But anyway, so I grew up around like this kind of new age environment. I've experienced a lot of incredibly amazing people and things, but I've also experienced what an industry it is and what a cult of personality it can become. I don't know if I got distracted from why I started saying that.
No, I agree. That's why I have some weird feelings about the book, because there is a cult of personality that surrounds people in that world, and even some of the like teachers and mentors that I've interacted with to learn some of the shit that I learned. There's this like level of guruhood that starts getting it's like when people are seeking
right
for knowledge and information so much, and they're usually trying to get away from something. They're usually trying to get away from some sort of orthodoxy or whatever, and they just latch onto a figurehead, and they need that figurehead to be bigger and larger in life. And one thing that my mentor that I talk about in my book that he always said that he appreciated about me is that I just always just saw him as a human being. I mean, I knew he's a fuck up just as much as I'm a fuck up. There's no person out there that has like nobody really has it all fucking figured out, because if you did have it all figured out, like, would you even be present and be able to be available for anyone else? I mean, so we're all just figuring it out together. And that's why me and my mentor got really close too, because everybody else was like always trying to go to him and trying to like tell me about myself and blah blah blah, and he's just like, what the fuck, like that's your job to find out, that's not my responsibility. You're
like, yeah, he's the facilitator, which is that's what you talk about in the book at one point. It's like this is the idea of the teacher. I think this came from the book that I read, but about facilitating the person's discovery of their own like path, instead of like giving them the path that you've tried. It's not the word
right.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Is like some people, a lot of people, especially people who are seeking and are reading some kind of orthodoxy, they need someone to signal that they need it. Like there's a lot of people who won't find a teacher unless there's people out saying, "Come to me, I'll teach you." And it's like so. It's like such a crazy important thing to be able to guide people towards it, but it would be so immensely corruptive. I mean, like to be able to withstand that the temptations of corruption that would come with it, interpersonally, socially, institutionally, whatever. You've seen them all in the headlines over the years. It takes a very special person. It's one of the things I really admire about Alex and Allison Gray is that they kind of are like treading that line of being almost spiritual guides or leaders without actually putting stuff down. It's a really interesting thing they balance.
I think it's I agree that they're wizards. And I think that a person can do that appropriately if you try not to label yourself as like a spiritual guide or a spiritual teacher, rather than, hey, I'm a painter. This is just what I do, right? Like you have your thing, and like we're all just like, but they have their shtick that they identify themselves with through the forms that they actually create. And it's not about first and foremost, oh, we're spiritual teachers. It's just like, well, I'm a painter And the path of painting has led me into this like greater community of consciousness expansion and exploration, and yeah, you know, like the visionary community that they've created. And I mean, they've created a temple and everything, but it's not about prayer or going to pay homage to them or whatever. It's just like, hey, here's a shared space if anybody just wants to try to find out what this whole fucking thing is that we're experiencing.
I wonder what the count is on the amount of people who have been turned onto their paths in part by these two, by their influence. And I remember first seeing Alex Grazer in like 96 or something like, or 94, I guess.
Oh yeah.
It's like, I remember when there was posters in the mall, remember?
Yep,
you know?
Yep,
like,
yep.
Yeah,
that's how I remembered him, was just those like mall posters that like, who the fuck is this guy? Like, what at first when I saw, I thought, was this some sort of you know, medical sort of you know, illustration that just has it? But you know, of course, when I went in deeper and looked deeper, it was way more than that. Speaking of Alex Gray and you, obviously a huge influence.
Oh yeah, on that cover, yeah.
your book. So you just had your Kickstarter of the Transmigratory Adventures of Philip K.
Yeah.
And it's a fucking great book, man. Oh my god, it is so good. This is the kind of comics I want. Like, if this stuff was coming out monthly in the shop, in my local comic shop, I would have a pull list.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
So good. So I immediately recognized this because I had done a lot of research and read Rick Strassman's DMT Spirit Molecule book, and this is the cover. You know, this is an homage to that cover that Alex Gray did.
Yeah, a friend actually lent that book to me. I don't know if I still have it. It's in a box if I do, but yeah, I had a roommate in 2005 that had this liquid that I've never had anything like it since. Yeah, it changed my world. I don't know for good and for bad, but like that experience. But he turned me on to that DMT. I think I first tried DMT when I was with. No, I don't think I did it. I don't think I've ever really done DMT right. Like, I've never like had the right space and really like committed to the experience. And there's always been like, hey, you want to do it? Okay, sure, let's do it. And then
oh my god, I can't imagine doing it that way. That's crazy.
I know, it's weird. I tend to like psychedelics like by myself, and I will kind of prepare sometimes, but I've kind of gotten into the point where at some point I discovered how much I can learn while on LSD, and far especially in my 20s, I started really kind of like transforming as an expressor when I was kind of taking chances in this new contextuality. And I found that even though I wasn't necessarily as free and burdened by my inner critic after the trip, there's still a lot of stuff that I retained in my experiences that I kind of concretized and weren't fucking there before.
Yeah.
So I've kind of like gotten to this point that I feel like it's got me basically, I've stopped doing psychedelics for the past half year just because I feel like I've been using it for the wrong reason for a while, and I feel like my trips are kind of washed out when I do them because of that. Like, and it's because I'm using it as fuel, like almost like a materialistic venture.
Right.
And I think I need to like kind of get a little distance and revisit it when I'm kind of in a more sacred space about it to see where I can open up, because it's become a little masturbatory, honestly. I'm not getting the teaching benefits as much anymore either.
Yeah. Do you mind talking about your first DMT experience at all? Like, how did that come about, and what was it like, and how was that? I mean,
I don't mind talking about it. I love talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, Philip K felt like almost a vehicle for a DMT level of experience, because it is death. It's the journey of, moving beyond the veil. So I don't know what kind of influence that had on it either, or what.
Well, when I first did DMT, that kind of slipping away feeling that you get reminded me of this one other kind of non-psychedelic. We had smoked weed in high school and did this thing called an Omni, which I've never heard anyone else talk about it before. I don't know where my buddies heard it, probably in a Thrasher magazine or something like that. But like let's do an Omni, and you basically take a big old bong rip, and then you hyperventilate, stand up, and make yourself pass out. And then you basically pass out and feel like you're dying, and you go to a weird place and have plus vision. It's
whoa, holy shit!
Like, I mean, like literally, we were falling on the ground and hitting our heads. It was stupid, but and while it didn't have the geometric qualities of it, there was something about that slipping away feeling that you had when you did that. And I had a kind of vision that was really quite breathtaking. It kind of inspired some artwork after it for years to come. But it kind of reminded me when I did, or that's what the DMT trip reminded me of when I first did. It was like that simulation of kind of the death experience, when you go death, and you really do. Like it's like the death of the material world inside your mind for a minute. Like all deconstructs and turns into pattern. And it was breathtaking, but it was kind of frustrating afterwards because I can't like remember it tangibly. It felt so intangible, and so I feel like maybe I didn't smoke enough or something too, because it felt like it was too quick, it was too subtle. But the other time I did it, it was kind of similar, but a lot of honeycomb, you know, hexagon kind of patterns and stuff. I'd like to do it with a little greater focus and maybe someone with a little more experience to guide me, just so I'm not getting in kind of cheap, real kind of domain.
Right.
Do really interested me in trying that. But the whole idea of that kind of approximating a kind of post-life reality or dream reality in that kind of physical way was pretty interesting to me. Like, that's always fascinating in that suicidal version.
Yeah.
That's the evidence of some kind of faith that I might have. Sometimes I might consider myself an atheist, but I feel like I do eagerly want to find out what's beyond that veil when it comes. Like, it'll be one thing I'll be looking forward to when I realize I'm about to die. Like, I'll be like, all right, here we go. I know something's gonna happen. It might just all end, and I'll at least have the closure of knowing that for a second.
That's always been my primary drive, is to, find out what that thing is beyond the veil, like what the fuck is happening. Have you ever read anything by Colonel SRF Seymour? Colonel Seymour?
No.
He is an associate of Dion Fortune. If you know her, she was involved with the Golden Dawn, and then she went off and did her own offshoot, like Magical System. And she wrote Mystical Kabbalah, which is like the best book on like Kabbalah from the Western mystery tradition perspective ever. And Colonel Seymour was part of her magical group. He has this incredible book called The Forbidden Mage, which is mostly just a bunch of essays he did, but it's one of the best books on esotericism that I've ever read. And he's got this quote. He says that, like, there are some people that most people are content with just the regular life and whatever, and then there are some people that are, how does he put it, obsessed with going down the road, going beyond the horizon where strange roads go down, or something like that. Going beyond the horizon. And like, that's, whenever you said that, that just kind of like triggered that quote in me of just, people that are so, it's not about, wanting to, like, I want to evolve as a human and be better and blah, 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 which we do, but there's this like exploratory quality of certain people that we just want to fucking know what the hell is happening. It's crazy that we are alive. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, I think there's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction there to society. I mean, we really do live in a society that is conditioned into a shape, and it has a certain shape that we don't really see because we're inside of it. But part of that shape is this fear of death, and that is informative of where a lot of people who I think have that need to embrace dominator culture, like, start down that path,
Yep.
So Terrence McKenna referred to it as dominator culture.
Yep.
The president of the world today. Gosh.
Yep.
I don't about that word so much as I have in the last couple of years, but I think that my dad's kind of reticence about spiritual thought in general comes from this kind of I don't know, like this feeling of being burdened by this old, I don't know what. I don't really understand it. All that generation seems to be this kind of shadow of fear that's a little bit alien kind of thing. And then I've observed too, as I've watched parents or their parents' generation pass over the years, that like there's things that they hold on to that they just can't let go, you know, on their deathbed, like secrets that they can't let go to the family, even though it means the family will never know the truth about some kind of family mystery. You know, it's just they still won't let it out. They still, you know, you just, I don't know. There's something.
It's
Even though we feel the kind of like manacles of modern era cinching around us every day, tighter and tighter, there's still something free about who we are as humans now that wasn't there a generation.
it was this like fear of like traversing anything beyond being proper.
Yeah.
Proper, appropriate conversation. We don't talk about death. We don't talk about. I'm in the middle of reading Charles Schultz's biography that just came out not too long ago, and his mom was diagnosed and died of pancreatic cancer. But it was in such an era that when they found out, the doctors didn't even go to her and talk to her. The doctor just went to the husband, and it was appropriate that the husband knew she had cancer and it was basically terminal, but we're not going to discuss that with the wife. We're just going to, she's the one dying of it. And they're just like, it's not appropriate to talk about it. So we're just going to, and we don't want to like get her all freaked out. You know, we don't want her to be all like hysterical. So we'll just let her know she has some pains and it's something, but she needs to take care of herself, And of course, they never talked about it with the family. And so Charles Schultz had like no idea what was going on. His mother was bedridden. She was screaming in pain at night because they didn't have appropriate technology to even like take care of the pain back then. And it was just like this like complete fucking mystery. And because it was just inappropriate to talk about things like death. And of course, since it was, did I say it was pancreatic cancer? It was cervical cancer. So it was inappropriate to even talk about that area with your children. Like you don't want to, there's so much fear around what is right to talk about and what's wrong to talk about, which is still just even kind of, you know, reflective in our times now in our social political market or environment, because you know there's certain things that you just can't, you're not allowed to express an opinion on, or you have to have the appropriate opinion. And we've lost all sense of nuance of being able to just, you know, really trying to converse around a situation and just figure it out together.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah, I think that's how you get Israel and Palestine, like for 60 years or whatever, just like in the sustained shit show that like will never get fixed, just because, you know, that's just one example. I did have some practice involved with that issue in college. It's just one fucking example.
Yeah, you can't. I worked in the Jewish community here in Kansas City for a while, and you cannot. And I know so many amazing Jewish people. I loved it. But you could not express an opinion.
You can hardly even say the P word without getting in trouble.
No, and any opinion had to be completely pro-Israel. And it's like, I can still be for you and your people, but also be for someone else.
Absolutely.
I can, you know, it's possible to do that. We don't have to just be so black and white.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, and in a way, it's a sad thing too, because, you know, I don't know, like it's this hyper militarization. I mean, I know there's always been like some kind of history of the tribes of Israel had a military component or whatever back in the days. Whatever you call it, but it's too bad. I mean, I've like learned some stuff about Judaism, quite frankly, just fascinates me. But it's really hard for me to invest in it. Integrate that because of my attachment to the Palestinian angle of that. It's been hard, but it just seems like the Israeli state and the kind of militarization of it is kind of like, it's kind of appropriating all of the religious and spiritual identity and legacy that I think is contained within into this one shape. It just seems like it's not quite how it's, but then, you know, who am I to say? All I know is that like there's stuff that I found recently investigating some Jewish mysticism, which really fascinates me. Some like stuff that at one point I got into dance. Like I was going to fish shows, doing acid, and kicking out becoming Shiva and stuff. And just stuff was happening. I'd previously not been very comfortable in my body. When I was like, late teens or 20s, I was kind of undergoing this like weird renaissance, and I started doing it a lot in small shows with like jam bands and stuff. Especially in a small show, you really feel how there's this energetic connection between the audience and the performers.
Absolutely.
And I started getting fucking into it, and that's like where some of the most kind of shamanic experiences I had really occurred. I was kind of, and like women wouldn't know what the fuck is going on with me. They're like, what is this guy doing with these hand dancing shit or whatever? And it's like, I'm moving energy around, girl. I'm not trying to fuck anybody, you know? Like I'm trying to be like a shaman right now, like believe it, like. And I just remember kind of slowly in the community after I started like feeling more free about that, to see other people do it. And anyway, one of the things I discovered in dance and in drum circles, this idea of kind of like playing with like these overlaps of rhythmic syllables. And I started doing this thing in some drum circles where I'd be like doing this thing, it's like this da 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 da, and like kind of like stretching out my phrase over it to like kind of like create a weird kind of walking polyrhythm. But point of it is, playing with how that affected things. Now it kind of shift gears because now my phrase got shorter, but it was still recognizable. I started doing this kind of stuff with dance moves too, where you kind of like alter the phrase as it. I was reading in an article about Jewish mysticism, how like there's a belief that there is like a way to use syllables of words even like that, like in the linguistic kind of alchemy magic that's part of Jewish history and culture. I mean, it's really interesting. It was like one of the most personally impactful like discoveries in an organized religious structure I've ever made. Where I was like, I've seen this. I understand what the fuck this is.
Yeah.
Like, so it's interesting because I have a lot of costume friends too, though. So it's like there's this whole fear of like being seen as like support the other side or something. Like, I'm just trying to be a broker of positivity. I don't even get
sure.
Israel and Palestine. I don't just go down that path. When I brought it out, except to get a quick barf. Sorry, man.
No, I'll fucking talk about anything, man. There's no subject taboo. Yeah, I appreciated that. I that was my first time when I was involved in the Jewish community, really seeing vibration and movement being a part of the prayer. So when I attended, I think it was a Passover meal, but the rabbi put on it's that whole thing where they do all the like that strip of ribbon on their arm and then they put a cube on their head. The whole it's like, what's going on here? This is so science fiction. And the way they pray and move, they started muttering, and the way that the Hebrew sounds, it's so relational to like some of the Tibetan Buddhist chants and some of the Quechua chants of like the Inca descendants in the Andes. Like that, there's a languaging like tonal structure that is just so it vibrates here. And I guess some people say like that's like where drum medicine is supposed to like hit is like the heart chakra or whatever, but and they're when they pray they're like completely moving like this. And it was the first time as a kid, because I was always fascinated with the Bible and religion and stuff, but it was very Protestant. We're just sitting in our pews, we're not doing, like, you can't move, nothing. And it blew my mind because I understood that. I understood this is the way like that soul is supposed to be moving, right? Soul isn't stagnant. It's supposed to, we're supposed to have something going. And I agree with you in terms of dance, especially live music in small venues. My wife is a huge proponent of that, and she that's where I see her work her magic most, is when we're at a like small band venue, especially like you say, and just being able to dance in the way that you're talking. And
when there's a small audience, it's like one person giving them anything. It's like, yes, water.
Yeah, you're all in it together in a way. And it's interesting because when I first started dating her, she would always have, actually, we didn't even date yet. She would always have guys try to approach her and stuff like on the dance floor. And she's just like, this is not what I'm here for. You know, this is, I'm here for this, for like this energy I'm moving. And she worked out so many things. Like you mentioned, it was a shamanic thing. You know, she would process grief through it. It's so like, people need this. People need to not need that particular, but you know, have a way of being able to move in the energy inside of you and to get it turning, because stagnation is death.
Yeah.
You know, it's entropy. And so, I mean, I'm completely in alignment with everything you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated. I'm just sitting here thinking I'm fascinated that we got from DMT to this, and I'm trying to remember how like that progression.
I don't know.
Man, you may, if you haven't, you know, you were talking about hanging on. Oh, I remember what I was wanting to ask you, because you were talking about wanting to hang on to that sort of honeycomb geometric experience. I had a lot of success with salvia, very high grades of salvia divinorum, and having it hang on a little longer. You what?
Oh, we tried it once in college, and I think we did it wrong or something like that.
Oh, really?
Badge or something like that.
I've noticed a lot of people have had either just negatory experiences with it or dud experiences. For a while there in the early 2000s, we have a college town close to here, Lawrence, that was carrying it in very high grades.
Wow.
And I would try to do it as ceremonially as I could without really even knowing what I was doing at the time. And I've had very, very DMT level experiences, and it'll stay a little bit longer than that, like 5 to 10 minute rocket ship, you know, and it lingers. It like when you come back, it lingers with you for a good hour or two. And I was always able to journal and draw out my experiences very thoroughly, and had the energy to do so. And of course, you know, ayahuasca is primary psychedelic alkaloid is DMT, and it, you know, if you have a really good experiences with a really good, you know, shamanic facilitator that makes it potent in Amazonian way. Because there's a lot of stuff that comes to the US. It's just, how is it you're doing ayahuasca and you're just up and walking around and having conversations with people? Like, ayahuasca is supposed to knock you the fuck out.
Yeah,
I mean, it's supposed to be a death experience, and it's it can last a good 12 hours if it's powerful enough. And,
yeah, I've heard. I mean, that's my assumption too, is that you wouldn't want to be doing that in a social situation. I would.
Yeah.
I've gotten to a point where like I don't really like experiencing that kind of stuff with other people, just because it seems like there's always a volatile personal element that gets in and quantifies things and gets grades and colors and everything. I might just be hanging out with the wrong people. I don't know.
No, I agree. The only time I like doing it with other people is when it's in a strict ceremonial context and the facilitator has a very strong boundary and beat, and doesn't allow one person's experience to overshadow anyone else's. So it's like you're gonna be in your corner, stay in your corner, and you know, that's it. If anybody needs to go up and go to the bathroom, you let us know. Other than that, you stay where you're at. You don't get all loud and crazy. You just sit and have your experience. And that's the only time I've ever really appreciated it. Because yeah, otherwise it's just you're dealing with other people's shit, and not everybody's always able to handle psychedelics because it'll bring up, you know, shadow aspects, the unconscious and shit like that. And then you're sitting there dealing with someone else's bullshit, you know, and that's what your time is, you know, taken up. So it's always good to have a really strong facilitator?
I don't know, man. It's like it's gotten crazy though. Like I've had some scary experiences with people, and it was all from this liquid that I had that I told you about back in 2006. And it's like nothing's ever been the same on drugs since then, dude. It's like it fucked my head. Like, and the people I was with too. I think it was like nothing. It's kind of like I don't get the same stuff out of trips since. I don't know. It's ever since that experience, I've always felt like my energetic borders are kind of slightly permeated by the world. Like I have a hard time keeping people out. Just their field, the sensitive, the subtle energies. I can't see them, but I goddamn sure feel like I feel them all the time. And like I don't have any defenses against them. It's like probably 15 years since that trip. It's gotten better. I think a lot of it's psychological more than anything, but yeah, it's like it kind of.
You're an intuitive, Sam. You're an intuitive, Sam. You're an empath.
It's true. It's true. I suck that stuff up, man, and like, project it. And people get affected by me really bad too. Like in that situation, where my energy kind of amplifies, and I think the way I present myself changes. I feel a little less like I need to accommodate people, a little more free to just express without disclaimers or whatever. So it just seems like I upset people sometimes.
No, I get it. I not to mention my wife again, but she has this conversation with me all the time. There are certain personality types, and I'm guessing you're one and I'm one, that we don't like all of the normal filters that people have to just keep everything contained. And some people's subconscious realizes that's unsafe in the sense that you very well might just be exposing some kind of truth that they don't want to think about or talk about. And so it agitates people. And people around me get agitated a lot. They get triggered around me a lot. And I think it's just because it doesn't mean like we're like special or anything, but there's just certain personality types where we just have no room for bullshit. And some people can just sense that on an unconscious level, and it's irritable. It's like a dog that knows there's something around it doesn't like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you tried, you said you grew up with your mom being in a new agey context. Have you tried lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram, or any kind of like ritual stuff like that to kind of set up boundaries for yourself?
No, I haven't. And there is a part of me that suspects that I have a passenger riding around with me. I had an experience when I was like 17, and I don't know. I used to think it was something a little demonic, and now I'm thinking it's I had someone back when this experience happened when I was in my teens and told me like, well, I know you think it's really bad, Sam, but it might just be you're not ready to see how good that it is or something. I've never seen the shadow thing. I've heard other people say it too, that like just like a kind of shadow figure apparition some people see.
Yeah.
I was just like in bed at night sober and kind of like materialized in front of this white door in my room when I was going to sleep, and kind of floated towards me. I was like really excited at first. I was like, I'm seeing something, My mom's always told me about seeing ghosts and all this other stuff. I've read about all these, mystical experiences and stuff. I'm really hungry for something to happen to me. And then it gets closer, and it's like I'm probably projecting them onto it, with my imagination. But it's like I'm seeing these kind of eyes that just feel as like it's closer and closer. It's like floating above me in bed. It's like it's menacing. And all of a sudden I'm paralyzed with like sleep paralysis, even though I'm not asleep, I'm on my back and stuff. And it was weird, man. I just remember being terrified and lifting my fist up and trying to scream no, and it just comes out as this kind of broken croak and stuff. And I just like threw up the covers, flipped on the lights, and like it was like the walls were glowing. It's fucking weird. And I just like left and walked the city that night. Like I just fucking left the house in the middle of the night. It's like a kid in high school still. I was like, fuck this place. And a couple weeks I was like having trouble sleeping. I kept feeling like it was there around me, and I felt self-conscious because I felt like other people must think I'm a total drama queen because it's visible. I'm like sharing this experience with people, and like, but I was having this, and it's like in retrospect, it's hard to say that I wasn't just projecting and creating the entire situation just for my reaction to something kind of maybe just totally arbitrary. But ever since then, I've always kind of suspected that I've got some kind of little buddy following me around, like stacking on to layers of communication with people. I don't want to totally believe in a world model that's like that though. So, like, but yeah, I thought I was possessed for a couple weeks back in high school. So, and I never did anything to banish it then. I don't know.
Whether it's like an actual entity, like demonic entity, or even a psychological projection, have you tried communing with it on LSD or something like that?
Yeah. In fact, that kind of like, there was like a mushroom trip I had that your book reminded me of. It's like, what's a good story? So I'll just tell it.
Yeah, please do. Mushrooms are really good for that kind of communion, by the way.
Yeah. So I'm spending the summer up in Bellingham. I think it's like a year after high school or the next year, but thinking about living there. And buddy from high school, an older kid that's already there, he tells me about this place on the beach, the north end of Bellingham, and there's this cave of thorns, he says. That sounds trippy. And this guy, Ryan Jeffries, he knows what he's talking about. This guy is one of the craziest adventurers through our childhood. He got in so much trouble, and everything fucking is historic. I couldn't let him tell me that without deciding to go out there and have a trip. Tell him that's not true. We go out there. I've been collecting all these things, like kind of power objects. And that's probably because I was reading Castaneda at the time. I don't know if he talks about mesas, and I don't know if I knew what a mesa was at that point, but I basically constructed one in this cave of thorns, and it was crazy, man. I'd been collecting these rocks and crystals. I had other little things over the years that I'd gotten, and I kind of just put them in a bag and brought them with me to the beach. I don't think my buddies that were with me came in with me. They just all ate shrooms together, and I climbed through this little tunnel into this cave against the cliffside of thorns. It was crazy. Someone had kind of sculpted out this little dome area that was just tall enough for a person. There's like a rock table sitting in the center of it. I mean, it was fucking crazy. And I laid out these kind of objects and lit a candle, and trips started coming in, and I was playing with this candle, and I felt like it was getting control over the flame. I mean, that's the thing any tripper will do, right? And you can have this influence with your gravity sometimes.
Oh, hell yeah.
But I really felt like there was a moment where I suddenly was touching on something, and I got really excited. And I was like, oh, fuck, how do I do that? How do I know? And as soon as it happened, I started like seeing this kind of hallucination of kind of numbers coming over everything, like patterns that look like numbers when you investigate it closely. And it's kind of like everything started becoming about this idea of like greed. And I started feeling shame, but I was like, when I feel shame on the trip, it just starts turning into a bad trip, and I'm projecting onto my experience with it. And then, so I just started feeling like there was some kind of bad God there. Maybe it was this ghost that, fucking tried to possess me a couple of years ago, or I don't know what it was. God damn it, I'm not bad, or whatever. And I just remember finally coming out of that cave after the experience had kind of like crashed, It started out fucking magical. Something was happening there. I was on the verge of something, and it kind of fell apart, and I started feeling weird, and I walked out, and I remember having this kind of like dialogue with either God or this perceived entity or whatever, and I was like, come and fight me then, motherfucker. And I remember like, calling it out and being like, basically it came into me, and like I was like, for a fucking hour or so, I was like rolling on the floor babbling incoherent. And that's what my buddies told me.
Whoa.
They had to like help me through this fucking weird regression experience I had for a moment. I don't know what sense to make of it. In retrospect, it's really hard to identify what I'm coloring with my imagination or what really fucking took place. But so I did at that point start to have a dialogue with it, but it wasn't the most constructive dialogue, and it's evolved over the years. I think that's really what it's been. Is this? I have a lot of issues with being impeded, having obstacles to get. Like you're saying, like I don't like bullshit, man. Like once I fucking smell it in my way, it's like They tear the roots out. Let's do it. Let's get this fucking over with. And,
Yeah.
make messes sometimes that way. It's like led me to be careless with people and relationships as well as it has, just, getting to work in the morning when I'm driving. In some ways, maybe like this. I'm just actually having this epiphany right now, actually. But in some ways, maybe this spiritual counterpart I perceived or projected is served the purpose of helping myself with these aspects of self that are lacking. I think it's a big part.
Yeah.
I've always been pretty comfortable with who I am because I'm aware that I'm pretty flawed too. So I think I've always, as a kid, I was pretty easy on myself about changing and growing and improving. So I think, something about that helped me, sure. It's got me some of these experiences along with actions helped me. It was always kind of pointing stuff out, so I didn't like, and then needed addressing because it's pretty close. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it now. And I think like I've gotten to a point. I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. My faith changes like from year to year. Sometimes I feel a certain way, and sometimes I feel.
Yeah, you're kind of you mentioned in Dystopian Times Press, which I believe is that's kind of your blog.
Yeah.
Or your I shouldn't say blog, but your forum of your writings. And
yeah, I started putting it out like during the pandemic for a while. I kind of gave up.
You had an article in there I had read. I mean, it's older, it's 2020, but Demonology for Atheists.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that this kind of relates to everything you were just kind of talking about, because I agree with you. I mean, a lot of people have asked me, and I've been through shamanic training and a bunch of I'm into esotericism and all kinds of interesting stuff, but when people ask me about what my actual belief is, it's very atheistic. The universe is it's not this anthropological identity. The God isn't that. We're just having this experience, and people are trying to create an identity around it. And your concept of demonology is less about these little gremlin things that are in hell trying to subvert us, but more of these aspects of ourselves that are part of the subconscious that cause shit for us. But it's stuff it's really, I'm going to totally paraphrase what you're saying, but I read it as it's totally medicine used as part of this psychic makeup to, like Jung talked about, to get us to a point of individuation, to help piece together fragmented parts of ourselves over time. And that sounds to me what your experience you had in the Cave of Thorns, which that sounds like that's a fairy tale or Middle Earth sort of experience. That's so fucking cool. But this shadowy figure that you have, because I've had something similar, and that in my life, and part of my training was having that kind of individuation sort of relationship with it, and not seeing it as a negative thing. It's not a demon. It's just this part of a lot of people give me shit because I try to make everything about psychology and part of the psychic makeup, and not that it's I have some people in my community tell me, Daniel, these are actual spirits. These are actual. I'm like, well, you don't fucking know that. We don't know. And I may be crazy. We all may be crazy, and this all just be part of our psychic makeup. But I'm okay with embracing that insanity too, and making this a fun, wild ride. And so, but I'm not going to literalize these beings and experiences. Because when you literalize something, that's when you get fundamentalism. That's when you get people looking at a Bible and saying, "Oh, see, homos are evil," and shit like that. That's I'm not going to do that with my experience. And so,
there was a poem I wrote in college called "In the Name of God." It wasn't the greatest poem. It wasn't one of my worst, but it was too long. But the basic gist of it was, about how in the name of God, we look away from God. Like the second we put words on it, we get into the idolatry of language.
Yeah.
The second God is a man or a woman or a person, it's self-idolatry ultimately. It's like, I think God's probably a guy like me. It's like, yeah, sure, buddy.
Yeah.
That's God, the great everything is a dude.
Right.
I don't know. It's so obvious when you're looking at it from the outside, but once you've committed yourself to this community and this like life and this ideology, it's like it's part of your identity. So it's what's the word? Self-immolation to deny it at that point. It's a strange predicament we're in. We're too smart to be chained to these literal translations at this point in culture. We really are, especially if the indigenous peoples who are still practicing their native like traditions can see it through with their level of intellectual sophistication, right? I mean, you aren't necessarily going to college, but they're able to separate out like God from man, and self from all whatever. It's strange. Something needs to give. I don't know what it's going to be, but it certainly won't work if it's all of a sudden everyone's turning away from everything that's ever happened. Like that's one of the things I really love too about your book is that it's very inclusive. Like it's not necessarily like it's trying to show how everything's connected in some scientific or pseudoscientific way with flowcharts and shit, but it's like you're taking a second to talk about the Kabbalah and other things, and there's the idea of having this kind of buffet of spirituality, to me is really interesting. It seems like the only possibility at this point is cross-pollination. Has to happen, and I'll bet it was happening all the time. We have evidence throughout history of it happening prior to the rise of the Roman Empire, but ever since empire and the church and stuff, things have been really cloistered. Weird.
The past month or so, I was in a couple of interviews where I got sidelined by the interviewer for my book. With that, I didn't know they were going to go this angle, and they started hitting me with comments about cultural appropriation and shit like that, and even using the word shaman, because isn't that a that's only for a specific culture and blah blah blah.
I wouldn't say so.
It's not. I try not to not be like an intellectual snob when I start responding to them, but I try to.
I'm Daniel Moeller. I'm a bro. Some bro or something. It's like that might feel like, and just trying to copy accent and stuff like that. That would feel a little more to me.
Right.
Oh, he's full of himself. Yeah.
Well, but you were talking about cross-pollination, and one thing I learned in studying linguistics actually is that you didn't get the English language because it was just, this is the English language, the English invented it. All these languages have evolved over time, and we're all like, there was cross-pollination always happening, where there are certain words in Chinese that evolved from other areas, or certain words that we use in English language that evolved from other areas, like the words condor, or there are all kinds of words we use that are from other languages, and it's the same with other cultures, and it's the same with practices and stuff. And we see that evidenced archaeologically. None of these we study these, like traditional history studies cultures and ethnicities as if they're these isolatory groups, like that they're these stagnant, these are Asiatic cultures, these are African cultures, these are European. But when you dig deep in history, and I think we're finding through people like Graham Hancock, and other archaeological investigators that are trying to have a more homogenous view of history, that really the global culture was always a global culture.
Yes.
So to think that someone is appropriating when it's a part of our culture. If we all have access to one another and we're all sharing information, it's different when someone goes in and they're stealing something, and trying to mimic and make money off of, something else, that's completely different. But I
So,
have my experiences are these of people who are open to sharing these parts of their culture, and they want that. They want their culture to survive. And the way you do that is you share and know that your culture is going to evolve by merging with another, but it survives. And that's the way most cultures ever survive. Otherwise, it's like biological evolution. That's the way species evolve. Otherwise, if they isolate themselves, they go stagnant and they collapse.
yeah, Bruce Lee is a good example of someone who reached out that way. He's famously had all sorts of pushback from his homeland and culture and the authorities within Wing Chun, Kung Fu, about him sharing it with white people in America, and fucking pushed it through and totally changed the shape of the world as a result. And I was bound to happen, like, with greater integration, like Chinese and Japanese folks to this, that martial arts would take a bigger role here. So that's something that's kind of interesting to me too, that Bruce Lee is a philosopher. He's not a mystic so much but he's got some really interesting stuff in there. Just about got me thinking about martial arts, and it's like I wish I would have gotten into it when I was younger, because unlikely to come into it training. I thought I toyed with it in recent years, because I think it'd be cool. But just this idea of having like reverence for the fact of obstruction and conflict in life. It's like it's not so much because all these people, like in Chinese society, like, that were so into kung fu over the years, just love fighting that much. It's more of a way of transcending the fear of conflict by being prepared for it. Traditionally, up until recent years, I think China's been one of the lesser martialized countries, like at least as the rise of Western nations has occurred, because the greater warfare probably hasn't been a psychological necessity as much within their culture. That's me just freewheeling and totally projecting.
Well, stay tuned, because I'm gonna have one of our ringside seats buddies, Jerome Cabanatan, on. And he's huge into martial arts. Like that's his soul walk completely, and that's one thing I really want to start diving into with him and getting deep into that. Having a long conversation about the philosophy and skills behind it, like what you're saying, of this transcendence of fear of conflict, but embracing it as a natural part of life, and making it a dance, making it something that is that turns into this engagement of beauty in a way. And I know he's totally into that. I've talked with him briefly, and he's not just in it just like, teaching kids how to punch or whatever. He's just he's in it. He's in the zone. It's really cool.
Oh man, I mean, it's like it's an athletic feat and discipline like any other sport. I mean, no matter what you're doing, like if you're training your body to do something, you're training your soul, you're training yourself, you're developing your humanity. That's important work. If you have the patience to do it with a kid. I tried to teach guitar for a little while at School of Rock. I just gave up. I wasn't doing so well as a teacher.
Speaking of which, not only are you musician, because we're going to be listening to some of your music, hopefully in the background and also in the beginning intro of this, but you make guitars as well, right? Maxwell Guitars.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? I don't know anything about the creation of guitars at all whatsoever. I briefly play guitar. I minimally play guitar myself, but it's mostly just, up to 7 chords playing around a campfire kind of shit. But
well, I mean, the main thing is to have fun, even if you're a professional. Audiences aren't going to enjoy it unless you're having fun. So
hell yeah.
That ought to be at the root of anyone's practice. It's just like they enjoy doing it. So, but like, it was like college, I think 2000, my undergrad work, where I first built my first one, and I basically just been stoned and drawn a picture of my buddy's girlfriend while she was playing her cello. We were all hanging out in her apartment, and started like kind of later on the sketch cutting away some of the shapes of the cello and into this kind of guitar shape, and all of a sudden I had this really weird Klingon spaceship looking guitar design, and I was just like, fuck, I gotta do this, man. I gotta make this. And I've always kind of fantasized about having my own guitars and calling them Maxwell's, so I could have, because that's my middle name is Maxwell, and the last name is obviously impossible to pronounce for people. And so I wanted to do a Maxwell Edison, So that eventually became like one of the main models that I've made a few of, But because I was a big Beatles fan, grew up on the Beatles. I did it in a wood design class. There's a really great wood design instructor, a wonderful woodworker that taught us. He wasn't a luthier at all. He didn't know anything about luthier. So I got a couple books and figured it out. And then, I barely got it to play with the help of a friend who'd done a couple builds himself to help with the setup. There's some issues. There's a lot of things that go into it. It's not rocket science, really. Probably is too. Rocket science is probably just as simple as breaking down and following method.
Sure.
I've always that's one of the things about building guitars that's been most important to me as a developing human, is that it's improved my commitment to methodology. I didn't do another one for like 9 years. It wasn't until 2009, right after the economy tanked and I got fired in Seattle, and I was unemployed, trying to figure out how to survive as a graphic designer, kind of a fledgling one around this city full of graphic designers that just got sacked, basically. So I was out of work and trying to figure out what to do, and I discovered there was a couple who had a shop just down the alley from Fremont there in Seattle that were teaching guitar building classes. And I was a graphic designer and web programmer at the time, doing some custom websites, so I made a deal to trade with them a couple website builds. As a compensation for the class, which is $2,000 to build an acoustic guitar in there, and each of those programs for class. After that, I started doing some more of my designs in my dad's shop when I had time to go out there and do it, or if I was staying there. I tried to turn it into a business, and I have some cool designs, and the graphic designs kind of helped me create a recognizable brand in some ways. But it's just been hell trying to get concrete commitments from other guitarists. I've sold a few and stuff, but it's been hard to get them in people's hands, and I just got frustrated. There's so many other things I want to do that I've kind of let it go. I'm going to do some again when I have shop space to do it in, but I'm presently not really going to have the shop space anymore. It's all just boxed up in a closet, and that's fine because it stresses me the fuck out. Honestly, every second when I'm working with those expensive hardwoods and shit, every time I'm routing a curve on those guitars, it's like, I'm rightfully scared that it's about to break something, because half the time something breaks, and it's a nightmare, man. So it's interesting because it creates this anxiety, and it's really intolerable. But through the process of kind of learning that discipline, I've become a better artist. And quite frankly, I had put together a little 12-page pitch for an original comic idea right before I started doing that class. And I'd gotten discouraged, didn't get the reaction I wanted when I showed it to an editor at Emerald City Comic Con. It's funny because I keep remembering all these little moments where I did put something together in a sequential project, trying to share it. I just got discouraged. I had a friend that I was trying to get to help me do flats, and he kind of flaked on me a little bit. I don't know. I just didn't have the heart to keep going with the comic project, and then I started doing the guitars for a while. It took over for about 10 years. Finding that even though I like the guitars and the designs and stuff like that, the fact that it's creatively, it's not as satisfying to me this time in the story.
Right.
I don't know. Especially as I've aged, I've grown less interested in human connection. It's not good for me to be all cloistered and stuff. But I fucked around a lot as a younger man, as a teen and in my 20s, and wasted a lot of time that could have been developing my street. So I kind of felt like I'm making up for it since, So I do a lot of shit. it's pretty obnoxious to people. They're all predisposed not to like me. It's like, fuck this guy. You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like it's arrogant and presumptuous and
Well, you don't have time, man.
Huh?
You don't have time for this shit. You have stuff to create. I'm with you.
It's true.
I was the same when I spent so many of my younger years just in that similar kind of mindset and fucking around, and I could have been creating, and I didn't. And even though I had the ability, but in too much time devoted to other people too, that I just let drain my energy and stuff. Like I'm with you. So what was the like push? What was the thing that got you to the Philip K. Edge?
Well,
and
people have been in my head. I've always been doing different stuff on it. Like in the back, I talk about it a little, you know.
Yep.
But, you know, I'd written a novel at the beginning of the pandemic. It was like a little memoir that came out of me. It's on Amazon. I think it's interesting. It's good up to a point. I think it flows well. It's just like the last kind of chapter. I think what I do with it at the end, it's kind of dissatisfying to people, and I get very personal and heavy at points and confrontational in a way.
How come I missed that? I didn't know about that.
I used to have it up on my thing. I kind of like just stopped trying to push it. I might make it available on Kickstarter. I'm launching for number 2. It's coming out. I think I'm launching it tomorrow or something. But, you know, it's weird. It gets into all sorts of stuff about masculinity and sexuality and failure and artistry and all sorts of shit. It all takes place in a week in LA right before the pandemic started when I was still living in Seattle. I came down to be an extra on the set of Bill and Ted Face the Music. They got a call out to people when they're online saying that they were shooting a little final extra reshoot or something at this club here called Academy. Kid Cudi was performing. It's pretty cool. I was like, needed a week off, so I just took a week and came down and had some LSD and passed some of it out at the fucking show. We were extras. It was pretty cool, man. It was pretty
There
fun.
you go.
But a lot of weird shit happened, man. It was like one of these. It was like a week that was like a bunch. It was like a nexus point in my life where a bunch of threads came together and kind of moved into their next phase. It was weird. It was some weird shit. I had to write about it. It ended up like unearthing a whole lot of stuff that I was not expecting to get into.
What's it called?
It's called COVID's Metamorphosis. But anyway, I thought I was gonna call it Peerless Loser, and then I came up with COVID's Metamorphosis while I was editing it. And we were like, 2 months into the pandemic, I was like, well, fuck, I gotta make something like this. Like COVID's Metamorphosis.
There we go. Now I found it.
I
Put
commissioned
that in the shopping cart.
Yeah. Oh shit. Okay, man.
That's a great cover.
Yeah, I commissioned this artist, Ben Barry, tattoo artist up in Portland area, who I'd done a website for some years ago. He was doing some paintings when the pandemic started, so I hit him up for so I gave it to my parents, the portrait he did, and I used it as the cover. But so I got that done, and I started writing other ones. It was like the first time I've been able to write prose with that big of a concept. I've written some short stories and taken writing classes and done those over the years, but I've never been able to follow a concept where really write a few pages, a couple of pages. So then I started fucking around with like a fantasy idea. I actually was trying to get a D&D group together, and I couldn't. I didn't know how to start one myself online. Because everyone's in home quarantine. So instead I started like just making up the characters and writing a story with these characters, but I actually rolled up all the characters. It was like I was 12 years old again. It's the shit I used to do at home, like as a 12-year-old when I had my role-playing games and shit. And so I've got this fantasy book that's like 200,000 words, man. I mean, it needs a lot of work though. And I was starting to do some illustrations where I was like, well, I was doing some drawing on the side, and I was like, maybe I could try and illustrate this. And I was like trying to really work on my cross-hatching and make it more like professional looking rendering. I was like, fuck, I'm getting better and better. And it's like, I just kind of had some big leaps I made in my technique as an artist while I was kind of working on this book, and I hit a wall, And it's kind of just sitting, waiting for me to come back and kind of rewrite some sections. And, you know, I've been having so much fun doing art again that I remember the comic I did. I started watching the kayfabe thing. Had this idea of Little Spawny, which is like a mumblecore rapper spawn. I think it's going to be in Wizard 3. I sent it to Eli and he said probably put it in. So hopefully this Little Spawny 5-page thing is going. I sent it to Todd McFarlane. The idea was to have a kind of more like indie sub-universe within the Spawn universe, you know, and like it'd be like full populated by these kind of musicians, superheroes that are kind of just basically like symbols of different forms of narcissism in artists, you know, like in every different genre or something. And I did 5 pages and it was okay. It wasn't bad. But there was some things with the art I wasn't stoked on. And I was like, what if I did something with Philip K? Because I could simplify the rendering required of the main character, because he has a pretty simplistic like appearance, but also like could afford, because of that, like a little more care for the backgrounds and stuff like that. So I was thinking it might be the right time to fuck with him. I'm going to try and do some more sequential art, because, you know, his basic style is cartoony enough that I kind of get by on some quick lines if I need to. But it's just got this issue 2 manual that's gotten so long. I've done so much shit, like it's so much more drawing. That's it.
The work that I've seen you portray so far in issue 2 is mind-blowing. It's like you were already excellent, and now you're like going to just whole new levels of evolution from issue 1 to issue 2. Yeah. I couldn't have been any more satisfied with what you have here, and now you're I mean, the issue 2 campaign is going to be a mind blower. I don't know what else to say. I'm not a salesman, so I'm not doing a good job. Like,
well, I respect that. I hate selling, but yeah, no, I mean, I think it will be a better book. I don't know if I have the energy to try so hard as the Kickstarter this time. I've lowered the cap to like 666 just to be fun. So I was like coming on a little too like churchy maybe the first time around for some people too. I don't know, or too like too nicey about it. So I'm starting to think less, like it might be less and less a kid's book. Like it's the content sophisticated enough that I think kids could dig it, but I ought to probably look at the age and teens probably. I'm looking at the younger audience just because it's just I'm wanting to eventually. I've got, you know, a lot of like euphemisms happening. They're starting to get out of control, and I'm like getting more and more drawn to it. So not sexual euphemisms, but more like drug trip euphemisms and stuff.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm just going off. I don't even know what the fuck I'm talking about.
So I know it's, you know, it's you even say in the back of it that it's almost even kind of a satire of all this stuff that you learn about spirituality and stuff. But yet, as someone who's gone through some like initiatory paths in Kabbalah and the Western mystery tradition and the shamanic path, I would give this book to person, and I'm glad because it's tongue-in-cheek too, because it doesn't take itself seriously. I would give this to someone who wants to have, you know, magical training or is like interested in having spiritual teachings. I would put this book in front of them. All the symbolism is there. You know, you've got Hermes, you've got thrice great Hermes in here. You've got you've got the Tree of Life in here. You've got Boaz and Joachim, the pillars of the temple. I should
have had one all the way black, but I put just a crow at the top, like to
I'm not sure if you would have made it black. Like you have to work with color composition and stuff, and you know that's hard to do. Yeah, at least it is for me. It's fucking awesome, man.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of the Wheel of Fortune tarot card and a little bit of the Chariot there with the two black and white sphinx in front of it.
With the sphinxes, yep.
So I'm trying to get this mishmash that's a little bit esoteric, so it's not, you know, there's not a cross or a Star of David or a crescent and a star or something like you're seeing like, or any other religious iconography that's like the main brand, but it's got little stuff that if you know some stuff you start seeing it. Yeah, I do want to keep it slightly detached from the content so it's not, but there are moments, like I plan on, he's going to meet Jesus and it's not going to be really pleasing to most Christians.
Fucking awesome.
I've got some ideas, I got some really controversial ideas to drop, but And so I'm kind of like slowly ambling towards that, so I don't rush towards it, and I have time to kind of build it up in my head. But
so, I mean, I wasn't lost. I don't know how many people caught this, but the title, an homage to the transmigration of Timothy Archer.
kind of, yeah.
Have you read Philip K. Dick's that full trilogy of his?
I just finished it. I mean, I read the Transmigration of Timothy Archer some years back, and I'd never read Valis or The Divine Invasion, and I recently read Valis followed by The Divine Invasion. And I kind of want to go back, it's in my parents' basement in the box right now, and read Timothy Archer again too. I wasn't as stoked as on The Divine Invasion as I was on Valis. Philip K. in general, he always leaves me the feeling of, it's always a cool experience, but you're always like, was that good writing? Because he's great, and he's like so mad. He's a wonderful storyteller, but like on a literary sense, he's not like the most like sublime writer. It's like, but it's cool too. It's fun.
Yeah, he's not a master of language, but he conjures something, and I think it's because he's always channeling the experience that he had with Valis and his. I actually just saw somebody greenlit a biopic movie about him just the other day, which I hope they don't. I don't know. It's like, do we really need that? But anyway,
I'd like to see like Charlie Kaufman do it or something. Someone crazy.
Oh yeah. If Charlie Kaufman did it, I would be 100% behind it. Because it would have to be a movie like that you feel like you're getting fucked up.
Linkwater would be another good one. Obviously, he's already like devoted a couple movies to talking about Philip K. Dick.
Who?
Richard Linklater.
Oh, yeah.
He did Scanner Darkly, and then in Waking Life, he kind of devotes a little bit of time to talking about it.
The Scanner Darkly is actually one of the only movies based on Dick's work that I felt like the same way of when I've read one of his books. You know, just that
the cigarette ashes in the fibers of the carpet, kind of. Like, kind of shittiness to everything.
Yeah, it's not like Minority Report or some of these others. It's like that's not the glossy kind of sci-fi. That's not Philip K. Dick at all. It's I mean, and I think I was wondering if that was my own projection sometimes, because I started getting into him in the time when I was just partying all the time and like bouncing from apartment to apartment, and like you say, the cigarette ash in the carpet kind of life, So I was wondering if that was my own projection, but it's really not. And it really hit home, because I got into his work before even reading the one that Blade Runner is based off of.
Yeah, James Ray Street and
Electric Sheep. I had read that long after I read most of his other stuff, and then comparing that to Blade Runner, it really hit home of like, okay, like people are taking his work and just making this weird gloss interpretation that doesn't. But Scanner Darkly has that feeling where you almost feel suffocated in the insanity of what's going on, and that's what I've always appreciated about his stuff. Because it was so real for him. And if you read any of his biographical stuff about him, goddamn, he was a troubled dude. He was kind of a dick too. He was kind of an asshole.
Yep. He had a lot of regret about women in his life, and continued to make mistakes with women in his life. He knows he was talking about the shame and regret he had about it in his books. It's like, I identify with him greatly. I really do. I even saw Pink Light for a while. I remember after this, although I never really thought about it like that, but the first painting I ever did was after this girl I knew died. We almost dated, but I was kind of scared of getting serious with her. I just felt like it was growing up too quick or something. As a teenager. She ended up with someone else. I ended up with someone else. And I always felt really close to her though. She died really tragically. She was 15 still. I painted this picture that was all pink. It was like dolphins. She was like, always into dolphins. She was a dancer. And I just remember, like, for a while after she died, thinking about this pink light and identifying it with her all the time. Like, when I'd see it in the sunset and see pink, but it wasn't like this beam of light like he talks about. But, you know, as I've kind of like played with this Philip K idea and gotten to know Philip K Dick, the writer, it's like, it's always been this kind of thing I play with. It's all just like, you know, associative thinking.
Right. Well, that's what's important about his work, is taking, like you were talking about, this pink light or pink color, this pink light, and although as mundane as a thing that is to like the normal person, like attributing such a high level of significance for yourself that it becomes a spiritual paradigm. It becomes a walk that it gives you significance and meaning, and it may not for anyone else. And that's, as we've been talking about in this call, and I'm sure most people are annoyed to hear at this point, as we keep repeating, that's the problem with institutions and organized religion, is taking that would be like you taking that pink light and turning it into a doctrine for other people. It's no significance to them, but it's significant to you, which just goes back to like, this is all got to be very individual based. It's, you know,
and there's so much out there to draw from. As long as we can just like liberate ourselves to see value in multiple kind of expressions around us of humanity, like there's so much to be influenced by. Have you ever heard of Manly Palmer Hall? Have you ever gotten into him?
Oh yeah. I've read The Secret Teachings of All Ages, and I've read the Mystical Christ book that he wrote as well. Yeah, I love Manly P. Hall.
I just discovered him like this last year here. I started going by that Philosophical Research Society here in LA that he founded. It's like a library. It's like open and stuff. But that book, like The Secret Teachings, I got that Jubilee edition with all the illustrations and shit. That's been a big guide in what I'm doing. You know, it's interesting too, because like that, read that intro. I mean, he had all sorts of flaws with his thinking. Over years, he became like a conservative icon to the radio. And if you listen on YouTube to some of his old lectures, sometimes he gets this kind of bootstraps kind of vibe when he's talking about social issues and kind of, but from the start and through to the end of his days, his take on spirituality, you know, I can see him being accused at points of like an Orientalist perspective. But at the same time, I think his intent was to not do that. I don't think that was his intent. I think it was at a time when there was such little influence happening between cultures in the world that like, it was really important what, you know, a number of others in that spiritualist and post-spiritualist movement did. Steiner, Blavatsky, presenting these ideas to the world. But yeah, like that book, I don't know. Like, I don't care that Reagan loved him. Yeah, there's stuff that he was totally wrong on too. I read that book, but that intro talks about, like, you know, how he just says everything I want someone to say. Like, about spirituality. It's just got such a great presentation of this pluralistic spirituality.
Yeah, it really took me. It really took me a minute to adjust when I got that book, because he takes it back to the classical philosophers, and I thought I was going to be reading all this like weird esoteric knowledge and Blavatsky and all this stuff, and it all started connecting to me of, oh, what all this really is that it's all just philosophy. It's all just, you know, human beings trying to figure this out, and we've later like parsed it out and categorized it into all these other things like religion and blah blah blah. But it was really foundational for me when I read that book, and having a better collective understanding of thinking and consciousness studies. Such a good book. Cannot recommend that book highly enough.
That was really exciting to me too when you started talking about the Greek philosophers, like, because it was like, I don't think I'd ever really put them in the same category as mystics that I know.
Right.
And then he starts talking about, you know, how Pythagoras really was a mystic.
Yeah.
Talking about the Italic school, and what all the geometry was really aiming at and getting to. It's fucking crazy. That blew my mind, that chapter. I was like, that was really cool. That's another thing I want to play with in the book too, especially is that angle. I think he's going to be introduced as a Pythagoras, but he's like, that's what I'm going to do too, is cartoonize a lot of figures.
Yes.
The Pythagoras.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's weird how, in my traditional learning of philosophy, there was never this mystical component to it at all. But yeah, after reading mainly P. Hall, and then I started getting into Neoplatonic theurgy quite a bit and studying, and really all of these philosophers actually, they always had this mystical undercurrent, and they were part of the mystery schools. I mean, they were the teachers of the mystery schools. Just what we're taught are the more just ethical, sorts of stuff that they put forward. But it's weird how information is just presented, and then when you learn this whole other layer that exists, it's like the Library of Alexandria being buried or burned.
Yeah. I think he has is it Hypatia was there when that happened or something like that. It was like a portrait of the J.A. Knapp did in that book of her getting sacked by the invaders. Was that? Who was that? Is that the Ottomans? Is that what that was? During the Library of Alexandria, it's the Romans.
I thought it was the Romans. I don't think that it was the Ottomans, because I think the Ottomans had some stake in Alexandria. The Ottomans were actually a culture that accepted other cultures as well and had trade with Alexandria. And I could be completely wrong about that, but
it sounds like the Romans shit.
Yeah.
They're trying to restack the deck as far as humanity was concerned with God.
And I would venture to say it was more, Christianized Rome. It wasn't like the, before the common era of Rome, because there's all these phases to the Roman Empire, and I mean we're still in one, as Philip K. Dick would say. the empire has never ended, but God,
that is it. Every time I start down that, just allow myself to think about that concept, it just starts opening my brain up in ways that feels great but wrong.
I love it. And what's interesting, if you've ever read Ursula K. Le Guin's stuff, she has this. Oh my God, you've got to get into her shit. Read The Dispossessed if you have any inclination to try to pick up her stuff. Try that one, because I think I would be safe to say that you're kind of an anarchist in the true political sense, in a way.
I don't really want to affiliate with any one group though, so I don't really identify as
Sure. But it's based upon two planets. One of them is based upon social anarchism, so anarcho-syndicalist sort of global nation, and then the other is a purely capitalist planet. But there's this trade they have in terms of quantum mathematical information that they have with one another, but other than that they stay separate. And it's based upon a scientist raised on this anarchist planet who developed something called I can't pronounce words worth of shit. Simultaneous theory, simultaneous theory. I can't say it. But it's based upon the simultaneous nature of time, that all time is actually happening simultaneously on top of it. It's all really happening at once. Consciousness in the brain breaks it out into disparate pieces and moments of past, present, and future, but simultaneously.
Timeline editor in Premiere does to a video clip, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's not actually the nature of time. It's all actually this web that's of space all happening at the same time. And that's Philip K. That's what Philip K. Dick's experience was in The List, of experiencing the Roman Empire but right here and now, and shit. And So she gets into that really heavy, and that theory becomes the basis of this whole other. It becomes the basis of some of her other books. It becomes this like theory that they start using to be able to do space travel and shit, because time doesn't exist really, and they learn that. And that's like you're talking about Carlos Castaneda and some of this other shamanic stuff. Like that's what they talk about and what they learn in these indigenous societies, and why they don't literalize certain things and information, because they understand that we're kind of living in this illusion that we've built up for ourselves, this sort of matrix, and there's no past, present, or future happening at all. That's such a fun concept.
Yeah, like the reason like the Mobius strip is so fascinating, right? It's one of those kind of paradoxes that just brings us back to those essential, I don't know what, it's like obvious, it's a possibility and an impossibility at the same time, reality, because it's like obviously it's possible because it's happening, but it seems kind of like impossible to really think about what us all go into it. It's like pretty unfathomable to think that it all started from a little explosion or something. I don't know if I believe the Big Bang. I'm more like inclined to think that this is all happening in just my head. Like I don't know what the hell that is called, but there's a certain word I've heard recently as like, but sometimes it feels like I'm just here to be learning some lessons, and like everyone there is a projection of my own personality looking back at me. Like you right now, you're like a satellite of me saying, hey, like instead of hey, like we're having a good moment. You know what I mean? I know you're real. I'm certain you're real, even though I have no evidence for that.
Right.
Everything that I have for evidence about reality comes through the filter of my perceptual organs, so I can't really know anyone else's reality.
Yeah.
I only see what's like happening through those perceptual organs. I have no idea whether that's what things really are. It just could all be a matrix thing.
I agree. There's a concept that the Quechua Indians have regarding creation, of like there's this creative like force that comes from the universe, but really that mostly happens through like us, through like individuals. So we're really the conduits of that, like almost like if creation was this wave, like we're the crest of that. And it's hard to kind of describe like the words they use and putting it into English, but it kind of speaks to what you're saying. It's almost this solipsistic sort of nature of reality, but not to the point of nihilism per se, but you really are projecting this. You really are like if there's a such thing as God, it's us creating this and projecting this all together at the same time. But it's always, there's a collective nature to it, but there's also an individualistic nature, and that's kind of to take it back to the Mobius strip, that's part of the paradox.
Absolutely.
So that's well dude, that's a cool segment to like end on here. Possibly.
We've been on for a while. I'm not sure how long we've been talking.
We actually have. This is one of the longest conversations I have, and I just checked the time and I was like, oh my God, we've been talking for a while. And I have barely even like talked about your comic and blah, blah, blah. But that's awesome. That's fucking cool. So Philip K, man. So you have your #2 Kickstarter is getting ready to drop. When? Do you know?
Probably today. I mean, I was going to do it 2 days ago on my birthday, but I just haven't gotten around to getting all the little details on the page in place. So hopefully at the end of today, I'll be doing it and putting it live. So by the time you get this out, maybe I'll be able to send you a link to put in the...
I absolutely will. And everybody needs to go out and contribute. This is like anybody who's watching this channel, these are the kinds of comics that you want right here.
Here's a little page working on right now, cleaning up the inks on this Glycon drawing. Yeah, pretty cool. It's kind of
That's fucking awesome.
He's got this bubble blower. It was going to be a joint he was smoking, and so Philip's like, what are you smoking? It's like, now it's a bubble blower, but it's in a corncob pipe, so the message is still there. But it's cool because like 8 or 10 pages become like, instead of panels, it's bubbles, and everyone's like, first circles, and it turns into like kind of 3D bubbles they're in and stuff, and they're basically trying to get out of Vicon's stupid fucking bubbles. I'm having fun with him, but I have to be careful because I don't want to be disrespectful towards Alan Moore in the long run. Like if this ever gets to be like greater notoriety, like you never know. So I might show them, hey, check this out.
I don't think Alan Moore is as.
I might read this and think, fuck this fucking Pratt, or whatever.
I don't think Alan Moore is as curmudgeon-y as the press puts him out to be. I had a conversation with Rick Veitch, who was hung out with Alan Moore a lot, and Alan Moore is a cool guy. He would fucking see what you're doing and fucking love it, no doubt whatsoever. In fact, that should be the goal, is to get this Kickstarter campaign to Alan Moore somehow.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I mean, I'll be content if eventually, I have enough readers to justify someone that knows and pushing it his way. But I'm just actually happy to be able to do the work and to have it coming out of this channel. I've been kind of fucking around off and on. In a lot of ways, I've worried that I've kind of like screwed myself out of becoming a master at anything because I've done the whole jack of all trades thing. I'm getting pretty good at a number of them, and it's cool because when I was 12, I knew this is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Because I got seduced by drugs and rock and roll, because I wanted to impress girls and my dad thought I was a nerd too, it's like I've ended up spending most of my life fucking around in these pursuits that have been ending up anywhere closer to where I need to be. It's really exciting right now to find out that I'm actually able to do it.
And doing it well. Doing it really well.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm feeling good at that. I've done some really sloppy work, so I'm proud.
You should be.
It'd be cool if Alan Moore fucking sees it. Sure, I'm not gonna. I'm just really self-conscious about projecting any kind of expectations into the universe like that.
Well, I've sent Rick Veitch books before, and he's read them. So you sent me an extra copy. So that's somebody whose hands I'm gonna like throw it at and see what he does, and maybe he'll pass it along. I'll write him a note.
Dude, that's super cool. Well,
cool. Well, man, this has been an awesome conversation. I want to do this again. So, even without side of recording, I would like to just sit and hang out and chat with you some more because I feel like I could just keep talking.
Yeah, man, I barely got any drawing done. This was great.
I know, I did too. I thought I was like, oh, I'm going to get my drawing time in today. And I was like, fuck that. This conversation's awesome.
Yeah, you're going to get going in it. All right, thanks for having me, Dan.
All right, appreciate it. Take it easy.